I'm really protective of the children's privacy. And you know what it's like when you live in the public eye, there's a danger that everything becomes a kind of a commodity.
No.
Our personal approach has been to not put our kids on social media and to keep that somewhat private, because I've been through so many iterations of fame. And I've been really exposing, like in the books that I've written, I've always been so candid about my, for example, promiscuity and the way that I lived and my drug use, and I would sleep with anybody and all of that stuff. That as I've changed my attitude to fame, as I've started to recognize what celebrity is, as I've started to see the degree of toxicity that exists in that world, the hypocrisy, how much hatred there is in there. Hatred, in the end, it comes down to quite sort of important spiritual values. I suppose I've developed a different attitude towards what's intimate and what I have to protect.
All right, Russell. I usually feel like I've got my style down and I'm pretty cool and I have just the right amount of chest for the audience. You're rocking the 2-button situation there, similar color shirt. How did this present itself?
Well, what I'm concerned about is that I've actually undone too many buttons and I'm worried that there'll be an inconvenient fold of skin at some point, that my sex appeal will be compromised. And that's the last thing I want in your company.
Yeah, but you're always shirtless on camera. You're jumping into the ice. You're doing your thing. How old are you?
I'm 48.
48. I'm 47. I mean... Got to say, we're doing okay.
We're doing okay.
Our age,
you look
right?
very handsome. You're very handsome in person. And I've noticed some of the memorabilia about the place that you're aging well.
That's
Florida. Good.
It's Florida
Honestly.
humidity. Yeah, keeps you moist.
You're slimmer. Your eyebrows look, incredibly good.
All right, I guess we're done. That was
Thank
pretty much all I wanted to do. Yeah, that was all I wanted to do. How you doing, man? I mean, you just showed up. You're in Florida. You were obviously in my house. You just came like 20 minutes ago. We threw your kids somewhere. I don't know where. Maybe they're in the pool. Maybe they're in the movie theater. We don't know. I don't know where my kids are, and here we are.
I feel incredibly grateful to be here. There's nothing like an hour-long car journey with your children to make you embrace work. I mean, I'll talk about Israel. I'll talk about the Trump trial. I'll talk about anything. There's nothing that will be difficult compared to the last hour.
So you just drove across. You were on Tucker's side of Florida, on the West Coast side. You drove through Alligator Alley. That's what we call it.
Drove through Alligator Alley. Encountered just one alligator that had been, I would say, significantly compromised.
Oh, yes.
And now I'm here with you, staying in Fort Lauderdale, made the sort of relatively short trip to where you live. And, my God, there's no greater pleasure in life than being a father, as you know, but you plumb the depths of who you are to raise those kids, don't you?
Yeah.
You encounter like, oh my God, because you're aware, everyone tell you enjoy it, because they're not going to be like this forever. So ensure that you appreciate the beauty of them. And God, I'm so with everything now. I'm like, this is transient. We're not going to be here for long. I must maintain this perspective. But there are points, Dave, where I could expel them from the vehicle, where I feel like I'm pulling up rage, like from my own child.
So all I've seen so far is 2 very well-behaved girls and a young guy who's not speaking yet. So you seem to be doing something right.
Well, that's because...
Or I guess it's the lady in there.
Yeah, my wife, Laura, is sort of brilliantly consistent and nurturing and powerful. And I guess, like, if it was a sports team, for me, soccer, there's one player that you're building the team around, but the player that's the engine. In the UK, that will probably be a central midfielder that's playing just in front of the defence, that's distributing. My wife is doing all of that. Me, I'm like those players that you had, I guess you had them in NFL, I guess you have them in NBA, players that would maybe still drink. They were like crazy. They'd be brilliant in 3 games and then go missing and you wouldn't see them. Like, my wife is carrying the team, I would have to say. And on the road, like a family by its nature is, I think, we're not naturally nomadic.
Right.
When you're moving around with a family, it's a significant challenge. But I'll tell you what, I'm trying my best to deploy the principles that I try to use in conversation, that I'm exploring politically, and certainly religiously in raising children. Because if these ideas are not applicable in our actual lives, then what is it? You know, people like you and me that talk for a living, do you ever find that it just becomes in the end rhetoric, and then you suddenly realize, oh my God, this stuff's actually real. We're in serious danger.
Yes, well, there's been a lot of that over the last couple of years, right? Because you and I both, and several other people in our space, it's like we start talking about free speech, and then we see the hit pieces, all of the crazy stuff that comes our way, and then you start going, oh man, I really might be jumping into a pool that could be made of something a little different than I anticipated.
I've been astonished by that. That's why it's really important, I think, that we communicate with one another, because at points you're so focused on how do I tell the story of what I believe to be deep state intervention into this particular military conflict, or these set of bases, or these set of interests. You're so interested and invested in how you tell the story that sometimes you forget this is actually happening. This is real. There is a corporatist, globalist movement manipulating power at an unprecedented level, not necessarily because they're more malfeasant than ever before, though that's a possibility, but because they also have the capacity.
It's a little more seen than ever before, maybe, right?
Certainly, there are counter narratives emerge more quickly, don't they? So it's impossible for them to have the kind of uniform control of a narrative that they would have once had, that they could just say, this is why we're going into this war. This is how this is going to play out. Now, immediately, there are myriad arguments instantaneously unfolding. And just what I suppose I'm trying to say is, this is why I think politics has to be practiced locally, because otherwise it becomes like an abstract theoretical conversation rather than the business of people's lives, the business of people's spirit, the business of poverty, or the business of despair, or the business of death. It becomes just like, how do I tackle this conversation rather than what is this lived reality we're discussing?
So I'd rather punt most of the political stuff for today. What do you think? I'd rather do, I know you're on your serious spiritual journey, but also even just spending a few minutes with your wife and kids. Like, I'd rather do a little more of that and see what's going on there. So talk about, what it's like for you to drive 3 hours across and have the kid there, and like, what is your parenting style versus your wife and some of that stuff?
Well,
I guess first, are you comfortable talking about that kind of stuff? You go deep on the spiritual stuff. You obviously, all your political opinions and all that's shared, but like on the personal side, like, do you like talking about that stuff? Does it make you uncomfortable?
Actually, I'm really protective of the children's privacy. And you know what it's like when you live in the public eye, there's a danger that everything becomes a kind of a commodity. Our personal approach has been to not put our kids on social media, and to keep that somewhat private, because I've been through so many iterations of fame. And I've been really exposing, like in the books that I've written, I've always been so candid about my, for example, promiscuity and the way that I lived and my drug use, and I would sleep with anybody and all of that stuff. That as I've changed my attitude to fame, as I've started to recognize what celebrity is, as I've started to see the degree of toxicity that exists in that world, the hypocrisy, how much hatred there is in there. Hatred, in the end, it comes down to quite sort of important spiritual values. I suppose I've developed a different attitude towards what's intimate and what I have to protect. But also, Dave, like sometimes when I sometimes feel like it's odd how defined we are by our political opinions and our perspective on something like free speech or military industrial complex, when actually I'm much more comfortable talking about psychology, my family dynamics, how difficult it is or can be to be in a relationship, the challenges of fatherhood. So I am comfortable talking about it. I like it because I think you can talk about it in a way that's not exposing to the privacy of my children. And my family life is what dominates me, particularly going through like what happened towards the end of last year, where I felt like I was subject to a significant media assault. And it's something that the investigations into that have been sort of so fascinating and has revealed so much already in terms of the various agencies involved and government departments. And it was astonishing and revealing and interesting. But also, my family life at that time was difficult because my son had heart surgery when he was 12 weeks old, as I've told you at the time. And in a way, it was an incredible gift because it gave me a different perspective on something that was sort of terrifying and overwhelming, but evidently a construct. And you realize that your family life is what's actually real. And when there's something sort of serious happening, in a way, too, you can see how it helped me to recognize the way that the media report on reality. They kind of would have been aware that was happening. I was in Great Ormond Street Hospital. It's a sort of a famous kids hospital. You're only there if your kids have got oncological or cardiological issues. And the way that information is selected, the way that information is left out, the way that things that are amplified.
So did that story ever break publicly?
No.
So that's
because,
really
of course,
interesting.
Yeah, because it's sympathetic, isn't it? If you're a father and a family man and you have challenges, of course, that would not exempt anyone that was guilty of actual criminal behavior from the culpability of criminal behavior. However, if there's a kind of a construct taking place that looks to be significantly coordinated, then it would make sense that you would leave out any information that was not in alignment with that version of reality, a constructed version of reality.
If you're looking for more uncensored opinions from today's thought leaders, check out our media playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.